Today's April 19, 2024. I'm honored again to have Professor Carlos Blanco with us. Carlos, tell us what's happening with Venezuela and the Biden administration, sanctions, Ecuador, anything else top of mind?
Well, many things are happening right now in Venezuela and Latin America. As we can see these days, some of the ideological friends of Maduro in Venezuela are taking instance from him due to the electoral the conditions, the rigged elections that Maduro want to have this July. Petro declared that it was an undemocratic coup to stop participating in the elections some people like Maria Corina Machado. Lula also said in Brazil that Venezuela should have, free and fair elections. President Boric of Chile have been saying that in Venezuela have been violations of human rights. By the way, in Chile was seek asylum lieutenant of the army, the Venezuelan army, and that guy was taken naked from his apartment in Santiago de Chile, and then he was killed. And the investigation of the Chilean police is leading to an involvement of the Venezuelan government in that, or at least officials of the police of Venezuela in that kidnapping and murder with this lieutenant of the Venezuelan army. As you can see, there has been an international outcry on this situation. In Boric has said that many times in the sense that there is something that shouldn't happen in a so-called leftist regime like that of Maduro. And there has also been some critiques from AMLO, the López Obrador, the president of Mexico. So what we are seeing is that the situation in Latin America regarding to the Venezuela regime is taking another path, in the sense that the coalition, the leftist coalition in Latin America, that was very, very tight with Chavez under Chavez presidency in Venezuela, is now getting a lot of troubles.
Interesting. So their kind of political cohesion is fracturing over what would you consider it? I mean, they still have similar visions politically, but in the actual, as we say here, putting the pedal to the metal, in the actual functioning, they nonetheless have friction. What do you think is the base of that? I mean, is it just national interest, different positions? Even good friends rubbing up the wrong way. I mean, what happens to a coalition when you agree politically but disagree, I don't know, strategically or in the actual reality of the situation?
Although some of these leftist governments in Latin America are in the way of a kind of a authoritarian rule, like the Mexican president, they keep institutions, and the institutions of those countries are independent. you can see that in Colombia, for instance, President Gustavo Petro is at odds with the attorney general, with Congress, and with the judiciary, but he has to respect those institutions. The same thing happens in Chile and also in Brazil, to mention some of the countries that were close to the Venezuelan regime ideologically. But when we go to consider elections, presidential elections in those countries, there have been free and fair. López Obrador won the election, Boric won the election, Petro won the election, Lula won the election, and there is a problem when some of their friends, in the case of Maduro in Venezuela, are not following the democratic rules, and they take some distance from this guy. Is what is happening. And recently, Lula and Petro proposed a kind of plebiscite for Maduro, Maduro's election, in the sense that there should be a kind of referendum in which the winner should respect the one who loses, because that's something that was claimed by the international community. And as we can see, there is an agreement between Lula and Petro pushing on Maduro to respect elections. That's a very important issue internationally, because as until recent month, there was a great divide. People supporting democratic forces in Venezuela were mostly from center right, and people supporting Maduro were from the left or the radical left. That's not anymore the case, because what is happening in Venezuela right now is that there were last year agreements in Barbados amongst the Maduro, some of the opposition parties, and with the participation of the United States government. In those agreements signed on October 17 last year, were Maduro didn't accomplish with them, and by any means. In those agreements were on elections, free and fair elections, and having the opposition to select its candidate in the way they were going to do it by their own means. Well, the situation is that 5 days after signing that agreement in Barbados, were held the primaries in Venezuela, according to which Maria Corina Machado became the leader of the opposition. She won the primary with 93% of the votes of all the people that participated in the primaries, that were about 2.5 million people. She had 93% of that vote. And what happened was that Maduro disqualified through the general controller and the judiciary her participation. Before that primary, and she appealed to the Supreme Court for that disqualification, and the Supreme Court, controlled by Maduro, said that the disqualification was right. So she was disqualified as a candidate for the presidency. But she was, and she is the most popular leader in Venezuela. By far, she has a support of more than 70% of Venezuelans, and Maduro has less than 15%. And as we can see, she was blocked by the Supreme Court and stopped her to being candidate. So she proposed another person as candidate, a few months ago, a few weeks ago, actually. And and at the moment of to register that person, that's a very recognized woman in Venezuela, very respected, Corina Lloris, another woman with the same name as Maria Corina, a grandmother, 80 years old. The system, to register the new candidate didn't work. So she didn't have anything to legally to halt her to participate as a candidate, and she was also blocked to be candidate. You can see her in the same day that Maria Corina, who's in the left side of the picture, proposed Corina Lloris to be the candidate. So the regime blocked the new candidacy that was proposed. And the situation nowadays is that the regime is trying to select the one who is going to participate as the so-called opposition candidate to be the person that Maduro wants to defeat. That's the situation we have now. At this moment that we're talking, the opposition leaders, led by Maria Corina, are trying to manage the situation so as to have the possibility of participating in the elections of the 28th of July.
Any chance you can run?
Oh?
Any chance we can get you to run?
Me? Oh, no. I'm just helping Maria Corina to create and to strengthen her movement.
Well, you have my vote.
Oh, thank you. That's important. Maybe I win.
We have a small referendum between the two of us. Yes, I think you would win.
Yeah.
So it's lately, like I guess yesterday, the Biden regime reimposed sanctions against Venezuelan oil. A, does that do anything? B, does it mean anything to Maduro? C, have you read the rationale for it, that they are treating opposition candidates indiscriminately or poorly? They're blocking them at every point, legally, judicially. And D, does that have any irony given the Trump trials? But that's a separate question. I'd rather stick with the first aspect of it, the Venezuelan aspect.
Well, the United States imposed sanctions, and also European Union imposed two types of sanctions: institutional sanctions for the trade of oil, gold, and other minerals to the oil industry firm, which is PDVSA, since some years ago. And when the agreement of Barbados was signed in October last year, the United States began to release those sanctions and to create to suspend those sanctions and to create as to create an environment for Maduro to create the possibility to agree to the possibility of free and fair elections. And as a result of that, some political prisoners, around 10 Americans, were released, and around 20 Venezuelans were also released from almost 300 political prisoners that we have in Venezuela. And also a very well-known criminal that was prosecuted in the United States, that was caught in Cabo Verde 2-3 years ago, and was taken to the United States for the trial, was also released and went back to Venezuela. This situation was intended to create an environment for the elections, and also some of the sanctions were provisionally suspended for 6 months. And what happened recently was that because Maduro didn't abide by the agreement with the United States, some of the sanctions were reimposed,
Right.
halting the possibility to trade oil with PDVSA, and the possibility of U.S. companies or related companies to do business with PDVSA. Although there is, I would say, a loophole in which special licenses could be given to some companies to do business, oil business in Venezuela. That's one type of sanctions. The other type are individual sanctions to some members of the regime, Maduro and his cronies. Maduro has a reward of $15 million. $15 million, yeah.
Like a bounty?
Yeah, a bounty for Maduro. And other
who put the money up, and does that mean he can't leave Venezuela, or which country can he not go to?
The United States put the bounty. But and other guys 10 million, and others are have been their visas suspended, and others are prosecuted in the United States because of money laundering, drug trafficking, and the like. Recently, a general of the army was sentenced in New York was sentenced for more than 20 years in prison due to the situation in which he was involved in, that was drug trafficking by the orders of Chavez. And well, this situation of sanctions, is a very some people disagree with the sanctions because say that that create a problem, a big problem for Venezuelans, and increased poverty. But the real thing is that the catastrophic economic situation of Venezuela was previous to the sanctions imposed to the regime. It's not true that the sanctions have created the economic turmoil, although we have to recognize that the sanctions increased the problems, the economic problems that Venezuela have had this for 2 decades as of today. So, well, the situation now is that Maduro wants to have elections because he is looking for resources, because the fiscal coffers are depleted. He wants international legitimacy, and he also wants to have to go back to the international realm. But the problem that he has is that he has a case in the international criminal court, and the case is advancing against him and against other of his cronies. So that's a problem. A second issue is that the situation of human rights, according to the Independent Commission of the United Nations, is terrible, because there has been torture, people killed in prison, and people has been prosecuted without any real causes. For instance, most of the Maria Corina's national team some of them are in prison. Like 4 of the regional leaders from different states are in prison. The national responsible of organization is in prison. The national person in charge of the relations with other political parties is in prison. 5 of the members of her campaign command or team are asylum and have seeking asylum in the Argentinian embassy. The team manager, the campaign manager,
Corina Machado's.
Yeah, Maria Corina Machado's campaign manager, the responsible of communication, the responsible of international issues, and the responsible of electoral issues. Those are in the. By the way,
what are the charges? Just that they're part of our.
The frequent accusation of Maduro is that they are involved in a coup attempt or an attempt to kill him, and that comes from time to time, the same accusation, the same accusation with different people, and they are trying, because it's difficult for them to take Maria Corina in prison. They have several trials.
Cut her off the knees.
Huh?
Cut her off at the knees.
Yeah, and they're trying to surround her, to create difficulties for her mobilization. And well, the problem is that she is a political phenomenon in the country.
Right.
She is creating another narrative, another situation because Maduro cannot go to the streets. He has no popular support. And every time Maria Corina goes to a town, a city, there are hundreds and thousands of people with her. That's a situation that is unbearable for Maduro.
Right. So well, let's just, getting back to Carlos Blanco as president. Let's say you somehow were president tomorrow. What are the things that need to be done or undone in Caracas and Venezuela as a whole? What are the obstacles towards getting from authoritarian back to a regime more responsive to the people? And wasn't the concept of the Chavez revolution to be populist, to be the Bolivarian populist revolution, and so forth? Was that just hollow? Were there any attempts to, democratize Venezuela, or was it already as democratic as any country reasonably can expect prior?
Venezuela was a very democratic country. The last dictatorship before these guys, Chavez and Maduro, was until 1958. Venezuela had 40 continuous years in which democracy was in place, with problems, of course, because at the end, the political parties were, not as representative as they were, and people got discontent, and that led to the Chavez revolution. But I must say that the idea that Chavez represented a change was rapidly, broken in the people's imagination, because what began was a situation of increased poverty in the country, of a very difficult economy in place. But Chavez had the blessing of oil. Oil prices, when he took office, were at around $7 per barrel. And in 2008, he got oil prices close to $140 per barrel. And that was the Venezuela's party in the region, with giving handouts to the people and helping the Caribbean countries, getting allies, international allies, bought by oil. And that was the one of the real causes of the leadership of Chavez, both within the country and internationally. But the situation is that it couldn't continue. Oil prices came down. Chavez leadership couldn't be continued with Maduro. Chavez was a real leader. He represented, for bad at the end, the aspirations and what people wanted as a replacement of the political parties in place before him. But it led to this situation. Venezuela at this moment is a devastated nation. Most of its territory is occupied by, criminal gangs, guerrillas from Colombia, illegal groups that try to take the minerals of the south portion of Venezuela. The country, the territory has shrunk in the sense that it's occupied in many places, cities, etc., by illegal forces. Even in some places like Caracas and other cities, the real control in some barrios or neighborhoods are come from criminal gangs. The second thing is that the population of Venezuela is, a quarter, more than a quarter of a Venezuelan population, about 8 million people, have fled the country. 1.5 million Venezuelans live in Lima, just in Lima, Peru's capital city. Almost 3 million people in Colombia, 500,000 in Chile, also in Argentina, in Ecuador, in Spain, also hundreds of thousands. In the United States, in Florida, in other cities and states are thousands. So when you see this, the social fabric in Venezuela is completely broken. Every Venezuelan that is inside the country has some member of their family abroad. And also, domestically, what is happening is that the social fabric is also broken, because people have to go, or many people have to go from one town to another town to seek jobs, to have better conditions. And the third thing, besides the territory and the population, is about institutions. Classic dictatorships, are authoritarian, are and many times very repressive, with people prosecuted, killed, tortured, but they have institutions, and they, in some sense, promote some institutions. But what is happening in Venezuela in this quarter of a century is that the institutions are broken. The PDVSA, the state-owned oil industry, is not anymore an industry producing oil. It used to produce more than 3 million barrels per day of oil. Now is barely 600,000.
Yeah, the Soviets had an old expression. It's a joke. The Soviet workers, they said, they pretend to pay us, we pretend to work. It's not quite the same thing, but when you gut a productive part of your economy and just put in political hacks and lackeys, you're going to get less efficient. And it just becomes these, I assume, minor fiefdoms of political sway rather than an oil company.
Yeah, well, you don't have a real oil company. You have a center of distribution of social handouts. And what happens with that situation is that huge amount of money, without controls, with one party and one very strong president, without democratic checks and balances, leads to corruption. But not a corruption, just in one case, that minister or that director of that office took some money or briberies or the like. They're taking huge amounts of money. For instance, nowadays, one of the most important leaders of the revolutionary process, Tarek El-Aissami, he was vice president, minister of oil, he was governor of one state, was caught by the same regime, prosecuted by them, because he robbed $23 billion. $23 billion, like more than 2.5 in Venezuelan international reserves in the central bank. So that's one case, but there are several others with different amounts of money taken from the country. This is the guy, Tarek El Aissami. He was powerful. He was incredible powerful. And now he is in jail. And you can ask, well, these guys are, trying to get things right. Well, no, the problem is that there is, due to the extreme power that these guys have, they began to fragment internally, and 4 of the previous minister of oil have been prosecuted, of the members of the cabinet of Chavez and Maduro, by themselves. Why? Because they are quarreling each other. They are in a situation in which, like happened in the Soviet Union with Stalin, with when Stalin began to prosecute their friends, their comrades, their partners. That's something that is terrible in these revolutionary processes in which they betray each other. And that's something that is happening right now in Venezuela.
This brings up a lot of questions. I've been thinking about, the potential wealth of Venezuela. I think it's maybe not well known elsewhere, but between us, Venezuela, we know, was like the 4th wealthiest country on earth through the 1960s. It was called, kind of Switzerland of South America, and wealth, and it was a kind of a great place to be, I imagine, overall. And Caracas was, fabulous place to be, and there's a lot of, liberty and wealth and all that kind of stuff. It seems to me that there are going to be nefarious actors behind the scenes. And I'm currently reading a book. I'm going to pop it up very briefly, by a friend of mine, Scott McKay, and it's called King of the Jungle. This is a copy I'm reading right now. It's going to be out shortly. It's not, I don't think it's released just yet, but it's really fascinating because he's kind of working a novel around this Guyana Venezuela crisis in the Essequibo region. And we're going to, maybe not spend a lot of time geopolitically, but, Venezuela not only borders Colombia and Brazil, but there's Guyana on the other side. And there's a very unoccupied area of jungly territory. And the novel, interestingly enough, and this is King of the Jungle, has to do with kind of a confluence of an Elon Musk type guy who's building a new city in the jungle for people who want to get away from abhorrent regimes elsewhere, kind of a Singapore in the jungle, or Hong Kong in the jungle. And unbeknownst to them, on the other side of the border, there are groups that are getting together to take over this territory. And so he's playing on the geopolitical crisis of the war that's happening in this Essequibo region. And in the novel, at the very least, there's a Chinese presence. And this is, I think, fairly recent. Last fall, Xi Jinping holds talks with Maduro in China. And there are also some other, nefarious elements that we, at least I wonder and worry about. Here's a paper from some years ago from Brazil about Venezuela's toxic relationships with Iran and Hezbollah, and an avenue of violence, crime, corruption, and terrorism. There's always going to be actors who want to kind of prey and play on the situation. What do you think? I mean, are any of the, obviously the novel's a novel, and he's working out of his own, fact sheet.
Well, the Essequibo is a region of in the border of the actual border of Venezuela and Guyana.
Right.
Venezuela have been claiming for part of that territory since the 19th century, because Venezuela has rights on that territory, and a RIC agreement with members of a team that were going to give a solution to that claim from Venezuela were caught by UK interests, and they gave the territory to Guyana. That was at that time not an independent country, but a country of the Commonwealth of United Kingdom. In the 20th century, Venezuela, the governments, different governments, defended the idea that the Essequibo belonged to Venezuela. And as a result of that was created a commission between the two countries trying to get some solution. Then the United Nations appointed an arbiter to contribute to solve the problem. But when Chavez got to office, he was so splendid that said, well, we were not going to claim anything because this poor country that is Guyana should be our ally. And then people understood that he was giving up on Venezuelan claims on that territory. And Guyana, as an independent country, so that it could solve the problem, not through these bilateral arrangements or with the United Nations arbiter, but because the things didn't go well, they went to the International Justice Court to put the case there. And that's what is happening. And Maduro, instead of going to the International Court to defend the rights of Venezuela, promoted last year in December, December the 3rd, a referendum for asking Venezuelans, you want to keep the Essequibo for Venezuela, you want to defend the Essequibo for Venezuela. Nobody went to vote to that referendum, but he is trying to make the case that he has a mandate for the government and for the armed forces to claim back that territory.
It seems kind of
and let me say, and instead of going to the International Court to defend the rights of Venezuela that are legitimate rights.
It seems to me, that there's an old expression, patriotism is the last refuge of the scoundrel. I don't think that's fair to patriotism, mind you, but it's kind of like saber rattling is kind of a diversion. Speaking of, we were talking about magicians earlier, but the standard magic act is you do something over here to divert people's attention from what you're actually doing somewhere else. So that in this case, it's like to get a land grab and stir up patriotic fever about what is, who the Venezuelans are, what we should get. and whatnot. And they're going for a relatively underpopulated area against a country that probably doesn't have much of a military, Guyana. So it might be very well be easy pickings. I'm not sure the state and status of the Venezuelan army to do so, but probably Venezuela has the money and resources to carry this out, and they, whatever. And I'm not sure the United Kingdom is going to come with like the Falkland Islands and shuttle off across the waters.
But they committed a mistake, a great mistake, this year, sending a warship there, just to see how the things were. That was a mistake.
Because the British did, you're saying?
Yeah, because it is a narrative of war in
right. So I have a timeshare. I have one deeded week in Aruba, and every time I'm there, Aruba's an unusual place because it's almost like a desert, climatically, because the winds go by so fast. There's no rain, so there are cactus growing and all this kind of stuff. And it's a very unusual place, and we like it, and we've gone there, a number of times. But I always worry. It's like right next to Venezuela. It's like, what's to keep, kind of an aggressive, regime from gobbling it up. And so instead of Aruba, apparently it's Essequibo. They're going the other direction. But it seems to me that it's like a way of diverting from your own problems internally to create this kind of.
That is a classic tool to distract from domestic situation, but it didn't work in Venezuela. It didn't work.
Are they carrying through? Are they going to occupy that territory for whatever reason? And even if they did, mind you, the idea would be to garner its resources and have people move there and do mining, whatever. But Venezuela itself, they're having, as you say, the quarter of the population has left, so they don't have like this German World War pre-World War II Lebensraum reason to get living room for their own people, or expanding and whatnot. They're having a declining population. They don't need more Lebensraum, to use a German term, and they don't really have much in the way of economic force or development of their own resources. So what is the rationale aside from the saber rattling and kind of a nationalist fervor?
Well, I think Maduro thought that with this situation he could distract from Venezuelans from domestic issues, the elections, the replacement of the government, the new leader in the country that was Enis Maria Corina. But the issue was that in that referendum in December, last December, people didn't attend because people didn't take the bait to distract from domestic issues. The second thing is that Maduro got isolated from his allies, international allies. All the Caribbean countries that were close to the Venezuelan government were institutionally against the proposal of the intent of Maduro, and they were supporting Guyana. Even Cuba went into a silent mood, not supporting Maduro. So Maduro got isolated. And at that time, the rift between Maduro and Lula began, because a problem between Guyana and Venezuela is a problem with Brazil, because the three countries have a common front border in the south and Venezuelan south. Mm-hmm. So that was a very bad move from Maduro. That the situation is that the problem is in the international court, and Venezuela has to go to the international court. But Maduro said recently that he doesn't recognize that court.
Yeah, so his own personal political training, wasn't he Chavez's driver? Am I mistaken about that?
No, he was a bus driver.
A bus driver.
Yeah, and well, but I don't have anything to say against bus drivers. And by the way, he he is a very, I would say, political. He moves in a good way in the political realm. He knows the maneuvers. He knows how to get allies. How to, as a dictator, he is not, following the rules, abiding by the laws. He's not doing that, but he is tough, and he has been managing to be the president, acting president in Venezuela since 2018, and he before then he was president of the National Assembly, and he was for many years the foreign affairs minister of Chavez. So he's not a dump.
Fair enough. So I kind of, we're rounding out the hour. I just want to ask you this one point. I kind of glazed over a little bit, but this paper here, I think it was done in Brazil. I'm not sure exactly what year it was, but Venezuela's toxic relations with Iran and Hezbollah, an avenue of violence, crime, corruption, and terrorism. Is this, obviously Hezbollah and Iran are in the news. They're on the other side of the globe pretty much. China as well. I mean, what are the footprints? What are the openings? What are the cracks that are left when you have a relatively lawless regime? You have gangs. There's expression "idle hands of the devil's plaything," but a country that is not well governed or corruptly governed is as well. And I'm just wondering whether we've seen manifestations of this and whether we will.
Well, the issue is that in Venezuela, we have to understand there is a low-key international war, I would say, in the sense that many interests are nowadays meddling in the Venezuelan situation. We have there drug traffickers, guerrillas from Colombia. We have illegal gangs, criminal gangs. We have Hezbollah, a very important presence of Iran, and that of Russia too. China is different. It's there, but mainly on economic issues. Investments. At some point when Chavez was alive, China had in Venezuela the most important investment in Latin America, just in Venezuela. But Russia and Iran have also political interest, not only economic interest, financial interest, and there are provisions of arms from Iran, and very important participation of Russia in furnishing intelligence, devices and radars and things for the armed forces. We have an important presence in Venezuela of these guys, right? Because Russia looks Venezuela as a way to participate in a hemisphere and to create problems to the United States in its own hemisphere.
Right.
And that's
China has the Belt and Roads. I think people are unaware of how much they've invested. I think there's this enormous port in Peru, and there's also, they've worked in Manzanillo in Mexico. The latter, I was listening to an interview with Peter Schweitzer, who just wrote Blood Money, about the China encouragement of the fentanyl trade. They don't prosecute the fentanyl dealers in China, and there's huge amounts of shipments going over to Mexico, and they have basically the maquiladora setup as automobiles used to have, where they bring the ingredients over, and in Mexico they produce it and then pop it into pills and zip it over the border. Venezuela is kind of the other side. Not on the West Coast, easy shipping transmit for China, but they've done this Belt and Road Initiative wherever and around the globe, where they're popping money in, they kind of build stuff, and then they kind of get ownership of the ports and whatnot. Is any of that happening? A, and B, is there kind of a fentanyl presence in Venezuela as well, or is that kind of being bypassed for other things like cocaine and whatnot?
Well, Venezuela is the path of many of the drugs produced by Bolivia, Ecuador, Colombia, and the like, and distributed through Trinidad to Europe and Africa, and through other countries to Central America and to the United States. And it's had been mainly cocaine, as far as I know the issue.
All right. So, any final words for us?
Well, I suggest our people that our audience of this video to follow the situation in Venezuela. This coming 3 months are going to be crucial for regaining freedom and democracy, or losing it for at least a decade again. So I would suggest to.
All right. They can also follow you on Twitter at Carlos Blanco G. I don't have the page up, but I might be able to do it. But before I do that, I just want to show people if they want to help support this video cast, they can go. This is a little bit unrelated. Zika did happen in Venezuela to a certain extent, but this is my book, and it'd be great if they purchased it. Even better if they read it. I very much appreciate any thoughts about that from our viewers. Zika is a real virus, and microcephaly is a real problem. It just so happens I don't believe that one causes the other, and so this is something that I think is a timeless book, and hopefully more people read it over time as well. It's out in Brazil under its Portuguese title, and I have a Spanish version as well. Should people be interested in having that, and I just want to show people your Twitter page here, Carlos Blanco. And let's see. And I think that pretty much rounds it out for us. So thank you very much, Carlos, for being here. Oh, you're muted, but I know you're saying goodbye to us.
Yeah, I say goodbye and thank you.
All right.
To all of you.
Yeah, our dogs are taking over. All right.
Yeah.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.